Let me ask you a simple question. Suppose your wife is the nominee in all your bank accounts, mutual funds, and Demat accounts. If something happens to you, does that mean that she automatically becomes the owner of all that money? Most people would assume yes, but nomination and inheritance are not always the same thing. And this becomes even more important if you die without a will. Because families often rely on conversations. A father may tell his son, "This house will eventually be yours." He may tell his daughter, "Don't worry, I will always treat both of you all equally." And he may tell his wife, "After me, everything is yours." He may genuinely mean all three. But if he dies without a will, the one person who could explain exactly what he intended is no longer there. And what the family remembers him saying may be very different from how the assets are legally inherited. So in this video, let us understand what actually happens to your bank accounts, investments, and property if you die without a will, and why simply having nominees may not be enough. If you're new to this channel, I am Nishant and I help Indians make better retirement decisions. On this channel, we talk about retirement planning, income withdrawal strategies, and real life case studies for those who are close to retirement or have already retired. And I think this subject is an important part of retirement planning because we spend a lot of time answering one question: will my money last for the rest of my life? But there is another question that we don't discuss enough. What happens to whatever is left after my life? So let us first clear up one common misconception. If you die without a will, your money does not disappear. Your family doesn't lose everything simply because there is no will. But you lose the ability to clearly decide how your assets should be distributed. Legally, dying without a will is called dying intestate. And when that happens, the applicable succession law determines who inherits your assets, exactly which law applies, and who the legal heirs are will depend on factors such as your religion, your family structure, and the nature and ownership of the assets. For example, under the Hindu Succession Act, there are specific rules governing how the property of a Hindu who dies intestate passes to their heirs. The Act also has a separate provision for succession in the case of a male and a female Hindu. Now, I don't want to turn this into a legal lecture, so let us understand the practical impact through a simple example. Let's take an example of 5 crore rupees. Suppose Mr. Sharma is 68-year-old, he is retired. Over his working life, he has built assets worth roughly 5 crore. Let's say he has a house worth 2.5 crores, mutual funds and shares worth 1.5 crores, bank deposits and FDs worth another 75 lakhs, and another 25 lakhs spread across different financial assets. He has a wife, one son, and one daughter. And let's add one more detail. His mother is also alive. Mr. Sharma always assumed that after him, his wife would be financially secure and eventually the assets would get passed on to his children. But he never made a will. Now, in case Mr. Sharma dies, what happens to the 5 CR? A lot of people might assume that his wife gets everything first. This is not necessarily what happens. For this example, let us assume Mr. Sharma is a Hindu male. These are his self-acquired assets and solely in his name. And there are no other relevant heirs that complicate our example. Under the Hindu Succession Act, the widow, surviving sons, daughters, and mothers are among the class 1 heirs. In this simplified situation, the widow gets 1 share, each surviving child gets 1 share each, and the mother also gets 1 share. So our 5 crore estate effectively gets divided into 4 shares approximately of 1.25 crore, each for the wife, son, daughter, and the mother. Now, I want to be very clear about something. There is nothing inherently wrong with this distribution. The question is this what Mr. Sharma actually wanted? Because perhaps his intention was that his wife should control most of the assets during her lifetime. Perhaps the daughter was supposed to receive the house. Perhaps the son had already received substantial financial help while Mr. Sharma was alive. Perhaps his mother was financially independent. Or perhaps there was some other family arrangement which everyone had discussed earlier. The law cannot reconstruct all these conversations after Mr. Sharma is gone. And that is the real purpose of a will. A will is really about clarity. We often think a will is simply a document that says this person gets this much money. I think that's too narrow. A will is really about giving clarity when you are no longer there to give that clarity yourself. You are deciding who should receive what, in what proportion, who should handle the process, what happens if one of the beneficiaries is no longer alive. What happens if there are minor children or other dependents? And what happens to the specific assets such as the family home? Without those instructions, your family may know what you wanted, but knowing what you wanted and having a legally effective estate plan are not the same things. And distribution is only one part of the problem. The second part is actually accessing and transferring all these assets. Let's start with bank accounts and fixed deposits. This is where nomination becomes important. If a valid nominee has been registered, the bank has a defined process through which the nominee can receive the balance after the account holder's death, subject to the required checks. RBI guidance also makes an important distinction here. For bank deposits, payment to a valid nominee can discharge the bank's liability, but the RBI says that the nominee receives the money as a trustee of the legal heirs, and that such payment does not eliminate other people's legal claim to that money. That sounds technical, so let me try to simplify it. The person who can receive the money from the bank is not necessarily the same question as who is ultimately entitled to inherit the money. That's why I don't want you to think I have added nominees everywhere, therefore I don't need a will. A nomination is extremely useful. Please have nominations. But a nomination and a will are solving two different problems. And if there is no nominee or survivorship arrangement, the family may have to go through the bank's process for settling the claim with the legal heirs. RBI specifically requires banks to have procedures for these cases as well. A similar practical issue arises with investments as well. Your family has to approach the relevant institution and complete the transmission process. Nomination helps enormously because it provides a clear person through whom that process can move. SEBI has continued to refine the nomination and transmission framework, including measures specifically aimed at smoother transition of securities from nominees to legal heirs. But again, don't think of nomination as a replacement for succession planning. Think about it this way. Nomination helps with transmission. Your estate planning addresses succession. You ideally want both to be properly organized. And property can become even more complicated. Now, coming back to Mr. Sharma's example where he owns a house worth 2.5 crores. This is where things can become practically difficult. A bank balance can be equally divided, mutual fund portfolio can eventually be transmitted, but you cannot divide a living room into 4 pieces and give one to each heir. If multiple people inherit an interest in the house, the family now has to decide what happens to that property. Should the wife continue living there? Should they sell it? Does one child want to keep it? Does the other child want their share of the money? What if one family member lives abroad? What if somebody wants to rent the property and somebody else wants to sell it? This is where something that looked simple while Mr. Sharma was alive can become very complicated after him. Not necessarily because anybody is dishonest. Sometimes people simply want different things. And this brings me back to those conversations we started the video with. Imagine Mr. Sharma told his son, eventually this house will be yours. At another point, he told his daughter, whatever I have will be divided equally between the both of you all. And throughout their marriage, he kept telling his wife, don't worry about money, everything is there for you. All of these statements have been made with good intentions. But after he is gone, what exactly did he mean? Did the son get the house in addition to the other assets? Was the house part of his equal share? Was the wife supposed to own his house, or was she only supposed to be able to live there for the rest of her life? Nobody knows. And Mr. Sharma can no longer clarify that. That's why family disagreements don't always begin because somebody is greedy. Quite often they begin because there was never enough clarity. There is another problem. Does your family even know what you own? This is something I think many retirees underestimate. Let's say Mr. Sharma had 3 bank relationships, 6 mutual fund folios, 2 Demat accounts, a house, some old insurance policy, some bonds, locker, and perhaps an investment made 10 years ago that his wife didn't even know exists. After his death, his family first has to answer a very basic question. What did he actually own? Then, where is it held? Is there a nominee? Who is the joint holder? What are the original documents? Where is the property paperwork? Which is the insurance company? Which broker has the Demat account? Where is the will, if there is one? Think about what the family is dealing with at that moment. They have just lost somebody, and at the same time, they are being asked to become administrators of a financial life they may never have managed. To me, this is one of the biggest reasons estate planning matters. You are not only deciding where the money goes, you are making the process easier for the people who remain. So, what should you do? If you are above 50, I would not make it this complicated. There are a few basic things I would want properly organized. First, create one complete list of your assets. List your properties, bank accounts, fixed deposit, mutual funds, insurance policies, loans you have given, lockers, and anything else financially significant. Your family cannot deal with an asset they don't even know exists. Second, check how each asset is owned. Is it solely in your name, jointly held? Is there an either or survivor arrangement? Who is the second holder? Don't start changing ownership just because you watched this video. First, understand what you currently have. Third is review your nominations. And don't assume that the nominee you added 15 years ago is still the person you would choose today. People get married, families change, parents pass away, relationships change, assets move. Go through your nominations periodically. Fourth, make a proper will, especially once you have accumulated meaningful assets. And if your situation is complicated, perhaps you have business interests, children from different relationships, significant property, overseas assets, dependents, or other special circumstances. Please get appropriate legal help rather than downloading a random template from the internet. Fifth, choose your executor carefully. The executor is the person who will help you carry out the instructions in your will. Don't automatically choose somebody because they are the eldest son or something like that. Choose somebody who is responsible, trustworthy, and capable of handling these processes. And finally, make sure someone knows where everything is. You don't have to give your children the passwords to every financial accounts that you own today. But at least one trusted family member should know that a will exists, where the original is stored, where your asset list is, who your important advisors or professionals are, and where the important documents can be found. Because the best estate plan in the world is not very useful if nobody knows it exists. Now let us return to our 5 crore example here. Imagine two versions of Mr. Sharma. In the first version, he has 5 crore, good investments, a house, money from retirement, but no asset inventory, old nominations, no clear will, and nobody in the family knows the complete financial picture. In the second version, he still has exactly the same 5 crores. His return has not improved, his portfolio has not increased, but he has updated his nominations, has a proper will, has listed down all his assets, and has also chosen an executor. And more importantly, his wife knows exactly where the important documents are. Financially, both men have the same 5 crores. But from the family's point of view, these are two completely different situations. And that is why I consider this a significant part of the retirement planning. Retirement planning is not only about building the corpus, and it is not only about withdrawing money from that corpus. It is also about making sure that the wealth you spent your lifetime creating can eventually move on to your family with as much clarity as possible. Most retirement plans answer this question: will my money last for the rest of my life? But I think a complete retirement plan should answer one more question: what happens to whatever is left when my life ends? If nobody in your family can clearly answer that question, there is probably some work still left to do. And one final point: this video is meant to explain the broader concept. Succession laws and the treatment of individual assets can differ depending on your religion, family structure, ownership, and other circumstances. So, for your actual will and estate planning, please take appropriate legal advice. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel. And we also have a retirement-only WhatsApp community, the link for which is in the description. And I'll see you in the next video.